my trajectory was just kind of failure after Cap.io. We were trying to start stuff and it wasn't going right.
I won't comment too much on Insight Pool because there's a lot of baggage that is related to that in the ecosystem. But having coached and mentored Adam through that whole process and that transition, I think an entrepreneur, especially serial entrepreneurs, there's this whole set of ideas that we're always thinking about. It doesn't matter if the company that you're focused on is 99% of your time. All waking hours, you're thinking about what's next, what are the new ideas, what are new concepts. And at the time, which was pretty early in 2014, and you came late in 2014 to the initial concepts of PrizePicks, the Supreme Court had not made the decision then. Right. So this is really early. This is, I think, a Supreme Court decision for, I guess, legalized gambling, however you want to describe it, only happened, what, 17 or 18?
2017.
17. So like I said, I've known Adam for a very long time. I always feel like he already had that when he was in college, especially what some of the concepts behind PrizePicks, being a bookie in the early days while he was in college and stuff like that. So he had the hunger and the desire from that standpoint. But in early stage, kind of post Insight Pool and trying to figure out the next thing, even Adam was in transition because he was actually doing sales for the Hawks, and then he was, I think, out in LA doing sales out there. Not really the entrepreneurial path, but trying to figure out what to do next. And then you end up, I guess, reconnecting later in 14. Walk us kind of through how that inception process was.
Yeah, so Adam transitioned out of Insight Pool. He went and did some consulting gigs. Adam Wexler is my co-founder on PrizePicks, very well-known entrepreneur in Atlanta, obviously now. And he went and did, some consulting gigs just to kind of like float and figure out what's my next kind of chapter. I think to your point, he had a big background in sports betting, fantasy sports since college. So he knew that he was passionate about fantasy sports. And I think that's one thing that I respect about Adam. He's always got his eye on the next thing and has a plan to kind of jump to it and generally follows through. So I actually got involved with PrizePicks and how it kind of came together in 2017. So Adam went and started to explore some different products in the fantasy sports industry late 2014. And from what I understand, they were iterating for the next 3 years. Yeah. Nothing quite hit. I think in 2015, the New York AG came out and said, hey, fantasy sports is gambling and had kind of a catastrophic effect on the industry. This is a similar time to when Adam and his previous co-founder on, the last iterations or the first iterations of their fantasy sports product were getting ready to go out and raise money. And so like that completely dropped a live grenade on their plans, obviously. Yeah, I mean, the next 2 years, I think for Adam, like he had conviction in the idea in the industry, and the way he'll explain it is he always knew the demand for fantasy sports wasn't going anywhere. The regulations needed some time to shake out. What happened as a result of that 2015 decision is ultimately it became a state-by-state kind of decision to say, hey, the states can regulate fantasy sports as they see fit, which is considered a game of skill at the federal level. So I won't bore you guys with the legal details, but there's about half the states in the United States that have fantasy sports specific laws. And then about half the states that are unregulated or they just bubble up to the federal law. It's not legal. It's also not illegal. And so, I think the next couple of years, and this is like one of Adam's best, if not the best in entrepreneurship qualities is his kind of resiliency and tendency to stick through with stuff. And so like, I think he kind of waited, saw the dust settle in the fantasy sports industry. And then we reconnected in 2017.
Did you stay in touch because you were doing Cap.io and you end up getting acquired in 16 and you had, what is it called, seed feed as well. Yep. So you're still doing a lot of entrepreneurial things, still trying to find the path. Did you guys stay in touch at all during that time frame of like what you're doing, what he's up to?
We did. I remember one specific meeting, he was trying to recruit me and my co-founder on seed feed to Side Prize. And I was like, Adam, we're here to catch up. Like, I'm trying to come work for you right now. So he was always in hustle mode. They were struggling, like I think the regulations were changing. He was having a tough time raising money. They had to scale up the team, scale down the team, et cetera. So there were a couple points where we met up and just caught up over that time, but there wasn't anything specific that kind of drew us together. And then eventually I ended up reconnecting in 2017. At that point, my trajectory was just kind of failure after Cap.io. We were trying to start stuff and it wasn't going right. similar experience to Adam, honestly, raising money, had to give it back to the investors because the product didn't quite work out, etc. So I was pretty discouraged at that point. This was the third time I went back to Georgia Tech in 2017, and like all of my friends are gone. I'm sitting in class with people that are like 3 or 4 years younger than me. I don't know anybody. So I'm very bored, desperately trying to figure out like what do I do next? How do I figure out how to get back in the arena, so to speak? I remember that summer in 2017, probably went and met 100 or 120 different random people in Atlanta, like Atlanta Tech Village, ATDC. I was just reaching out to entrepreneurs and residents, et cetera, just like having convos. I think that's the summer I remember just like trying to hustle as much as I could to try to figure something out. And completely unrelated, one of those like DMs I got was from Adam on Snapchat or something. And he's like, "What are you doing nowadays?" I was like doing some e-commerce drop shipping stuff. I remember the conversation pretty distinctly. He's like, "Hey, like I've been we had been in touch. He's like, I've got a new idea in the fantasy sports industry, much more simplified game. We think there's some legal grounds here. Would you be interested in like having a combo?" And I was desperate. I was like, "Yeah, let's grab a call," and so he pitched me on the idea. He had some basic mock-ups and not very far from like what PrizePicks looks like today. For those that are familiar, basically you come in, pick a couple players that you like, predict if they're going to do better or worse than the projection that we're giving them on their fantasy score or any other statistic. And if you get all your selections right, you win a big payout. If you miss one of them, the house takes the money And so this was like a different spin on fantasy sports, which is traditionally known as a peer-to-peer format where you're competing in a pool with a bunch of different other players. And I think this was Adam's genius, which is he was looking at the laws and the regulations that were being drawn up on a state-by-state level. And again, I won't bore you guys with the legal detail, but I do think this part's interesting. Like the predominant language in the regulations that was drawn up is, hey, a fantasy skill contest must involve one or more participants in the contest. And so his interpretation of that was, hey, the house can be a participant against one person. This is a much more simplified format. Obviously appeals to a more mass market kind of casual customer where they don't have to compete, like build a lineup of 6 different players and know everything about every player. They're competing against a bunch of poker players and people that are running optimizers on Excel and losing money. My immediate friend group around that time, they were all degenerate sports bettors. So I've never been huge into sports betting, but I got it right away. I was like, my first question was, is this legal and how? And if it was, obviously it was pretty clear this would be a pretty successful product. And again, the B2C thing got me really excited. Like there's a chance to kind of take a spin at this and build a real mass market solution that dumbs it down for someone like me too, who, isn't like a diehard NFL fan, but I love, like, if I'm sitting around, the TV with friends on a Sunday, I love to get some action in and root alongside my buddies. So